Okay, quick question. Do you remember your first day of school? Maybe you remember your backpack, maybe you remember crying, maybe you remember some kid eating glue. Here's the thing, some of those memories didn't happen. Not to you anyway. And before you say, no, I definitely remember it, that's exactly what someone with a false memory would say. Today, we're going to talk about why your brain is basically a really confident liar. And I mean that in the most loving way possible. We tend to think of memory like a video camera. You experience something, it gets recorded, and whenever you want to remember it, you just hit play. That mental model is so wrong, it's almost impressive. Memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every single time you remember something, your brain is rebuilding it from scratch, filling in gaps, borrowing details from other experiences, and occasionally, just making stuff up. Think about that for a second. Every time you access a memory, you're editing it, and then saving the edited version over the original. It's like if every time you watched a movie, Netflix secretly swapped one scene with something it thought fit better, and you'd never know. The term psychologists use is reconstructive memory, and it was first seriously studied by a British psychologist named Frederick Bartlett back in the 1930s. He had people read a Native American folktale, full of unfamiliar cultural details, and then retell it from memory later. Every time, people unconsciously replaced the weird parts with things that made more sense to them. Their brain auto-corrected the story to fit their existing worldview. Your memory isn't a library. It's more like a very opinionated editor. Now here's where it gets genuinely disturbing. In the 1990s, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, who's basically the queen of false memory research, ran a study where she planted completely fake memories in people's heads. Here's how it worked. She told participants that their family members had shared 4 childhood memories about them. 3 were real. 1 was invented. The person had gotten lost in a shopping mall as a child, panicked, and was eventually helped by an elderly stranger. Never happened. Made up entirely. But after reading it, about 25% of participants not only believed the memory, they started adding details to it. The color of the stranger's jacket, what they were feeling, how scared they were. They weren't lying. They genuinely remembered something that never occurred. And when Loftus told them the mall story was fake, some of them argued with her because it felt real, because the memory had texture and emotion and detail. This is a really uncomfortable realization. The vividness of a memory tells you almost nothing about its accuracy. So why is the brain like this? Why would evolution give us a memory system that just casually invents the past? Turns out, it's because memory isn't for preserving the past. Memory is for predicting the future. Your brain doesn't store experiences like a hard drive. It stores patterns, useful abstractions. Hot things burn. This person is trustworthy. Last time I ignored that sound in the kitchen, the cat had knocked something over. Your brain cares about meaning and utility, not perfect archival accuracy. And that means when you try to recall something specific, it reconstructs from these patterns. And sometimes the reconstruction gets a little creative. There are a few specific mechanisms at play here. Suggestion. If someone tells you something happened or asks a leading question, your brain can incorporate that as a memory. Loftus showed this dramatically. She showed people footage of a car accident, then asked either how fast were the cars going when they hit each other, or how fast were they going when they smashed into each other. The smashed group remembered the cars going significantly faster, and were more likely to report seeing broken glass that wasn't in the video. One word changed the memory. Imagination inflation. If you imagine something happening, your brain can later mistake the imagined event for a real one. This is especially true for things you've imagined repeatedly, which is a slightly alarming thing to think about.
source monitoring errors. This is when you remember that you know something, but get confused about where you learned it. You might remember a fact you heard from a friend, but your brain files it as something you personally experienced.
Okay, so you misremember where you left your keys. Big deal. Except, this actually matters enormously in some contexts. Eyewitness testimony. For most of the 20th century, eyewitness testimony was considered some of the most powerful evidence in criminal trials. I saw him. I'm certain. Juries love certainty. But the Innocence Project, an organization that uses DNA evidence to exonerate wrongly convicted people, has found that in over 70% of wrongful convictions that were later overturned, eyewitness misidentification played a role. 70%. These weren't people who were lying. They were people who genuinely, sincerely believed they had seen what they said they saw. And they were wrong. The stress of a traumatic event, which seems like it should lock a memory in, actually makes things worse. High stress narrows attention, and the brain often focuses on one salient detail, a weapon, for example, while the surrounding scene gets fuzzy. Researchers call this weapon focus effect. Elizabeth Loftus has spent decades testifying in criminal cases, trying to explain this, and she still has to fight against the deeply held belief that if someone is sure, they must be right. Confidence is not accuracy. Say that 3 times.
Here's one last thing that breaks my brain a little. Researchers have successfully implanted false memories of being lost in a mall, you heard that one, nearly drowning as a child, being attacked by an animal, witnessing demonic possession. That last one was in a study where participants were pre-screened to be skeptical of the paranormal. And yet, what this tells us is that the threshold for creating a false memory is surprisingly low. Social suggestion, emotional reinforcement, and a few repetitions can build something that feels absolutely 100% real. Which raises a weird question. How many of your current memories are fully accurate? And if you can't tell the difference between a real memory and a false one, does it even matter? I'd argue it does, because knowing that memory is fallible makes you more careful about how much confidence you place in it, especially when it really counts. Your brain isn't broken. It's just optimized for something other than truth. Memory isn't a record of what happened. It's your brain's best current guess. And your brain, as it turns out, is a very creative guesser. If you found this interesting, the name to look up is Elizabeth Loftus. Her TED Talk and her book, The Myth of Repressed Memory, are both worth your time. Also, Frederick Bartlett's original work, if you want to go deep. Thanks for watching. And hey, if you remember enjoying this video, that memory's definitely real. Probably.